first set of IEMs that I'm reviewing from Truthear, and there's been a lot of hype around this brand, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. But before I get into the review, thank you to Headphone Zone for making this review possible by sending me a demo unit. All thoughts and opinions are my own. So let's jump straight in with how these are built. In the IEM world, these come with a slightly different unboxing experience which I'm used to, so this is a nice welcome. You get a neat looking outer box with a small inner box you pull out. Upon opening it, you're greeted with a spring-loaded case that holds the IEMs in it. You get some literature and not 1 or 2 sets of ear tips, but 7 sets ranging from small to large ones, and one lot of them having a tighter bore and the other having a wider bore, which does affect some aspects of how these sound, which I'll speak about in the chapter about sound. The case provided is a neat faux leather finished one that should fit easily in any pocket or bag should you want to travel with these. These come with a 3.5 mm termination on one end and a universal 0.78 2-pin termination on the other side for the IEMs. So if you want to use any upgraded cables, it's easy enough to do so. The cable itself is an oxygen-free copper cable which should be more than good enough for these IEMs, and the surface of the outside is a smooth, soft plastic which ensures it won't rub or snag onto your clothing, so you're not going to hear any fabric grazing sounds from these. There's a neat little binder near the middle of the cable leading to the IEMs, which has the brand name and logo on it. And further up on the right side of the cable, you get a control module with a microphone in it. The controls let you increase or reduce the device's volume that you're connected to, and the middle button allows you to play and pause your music. On the upper sections that connect to the IEM, these have ear loops which sit quite comfortably around my ear without tension, so sometimes it's easy to forget these are even on. Moving on to the IEMs themselves, they look quite compact in size and fit rather well. The faceplate on these has a very neatly done hexagonal shape design and a star in the middle of the metal plate. The inner side is a matte black finish and the cavity carries on the hexagonal design as well. These fit quite comfortably, but I've sometimes felt that I need to push these further into my ear canal, but when I do that, this bulge right here tends to hurt my left ear. So I've stopped pushing these further into my ears for better comfort. Coming back to the microphone on this, now you can pick this up with or without a microphone, but there's a very slight price difference between the two. But if you want to use a microphone to play games and talk to your fellow players, or if you want to take some phone calls on this, here's a small demo to show how exactly your voice will carry over to your recipient. So I'm recording from the confines of my studio at the moment, and right now the microphone that's picking up my voice is the microphone in the phone that I'm using presently, and I will plug into this phone with the Apple dongle DAC right now, so it will shift over to the microphone in the Truthear Hola, just to give you a sense of what this environment sounds like and what the Truthear Hola microphone sounds like. So I'll plug it in right away, and I am on the Truthear microphone right now. So this is pretty much how your voice is going to carry over to any of your recipients if you make any phone calls, and expect this similar quality to carry over even if you're gaming. Now, don't expect this to be the best in the market out there, because there's no technology in it, in the sense there's no environmental noise cancelling, there is no battery that's running this. It's just a very simple mic that it'll work, it'll get you through, and you are the best judge to decide whether or not this kind of microphone quality works well enough for you. So I hope this little audio demo has given you a better understanding about these IEMs in particular, and I'll see you in the chapter about sound. These come with 11 mm dynamic drivers and have a frequency response of 20 Hz all the way up to 20,000 Hz. And they're fairly easy to drive with a low resistance of just 28 ohms. I've been driving these with the iFi Go Link. I'm in the process of reviewing this little dongle DAC, and it has no issues with driving these at all. On a volume front, I've been listening to these anywhere between 25 and 35% volume. Now, whenever I go towards 40%, they get a little too loud for me. So I wouldn't recommend listening to these anywhere beyond 45 or 50% volume if you want to preserve your hearing in the long run. Soundstage on these is much like other IEMs that I've tested in the past, but it does have good vertical stage as well, especially when you're listening to good recordings. Another thing that does affect the stage with these is the ear tips that have been provided with these. One set does have a tighter bore and the other does have a much wider bore, and I found that with the tighter bore it is a little more restricted, but when you swap to the larger bore it does get a little more expansive. There is a little more openness that kicks in, and it tends to let in more frequencies, seem as if they're coming from a little further out of the IEMs. When doing a little A/B testing between the wider bore and the tighter bore, I found myself sticking more with the wider one because the openness is definitely significant compared to the tighter one. Imaging and detail recovery from any IEMs that I've tested in this price range never cease to amaze me. You're able to pick out all sorts of nuances, from plucking of strings to even inhales from the artist, and it's able to pull you so much further into your music and enjoy these nuances so much better. High frequencies do have a slight elevation in its tuning, but it is not exaggerated. This range doesn't hit sibilance or any sense of harshness at any point with any genre of music. You could listen to just highs all day long and come away with no listening fatigue. Truthear has managed to balance the scales quite well with this range despite boosting it slightly. Sparkles and shimmers from triangles come through cleanly and quite effortlessly, almost as if it were a seasoned set of IEMs. Listening to Dave Brubeck's Take 5, Joe Morello's soft hits on the 20-inch ride cymbal come through almost as if you've got your ear a few feet away from it. This track holds the drums hard on the left channel, with the piano on the right, and all the higher frequencies that are bouncing off the walls combined with a slight reverb can be heard and experienced clearly in the dead center phantom channel. That is, when Paul Desmond isn't playing the saxophone. I didn't expect this kind of experience from these. Mid frequencies have a flatter presentation, with the upper mids having a slight elevated tuning. Despite this elevation in the upper mids, vocals surprisingly don't get nasal sounding. Sometimes this kind of tuning can tend to sound sharp and hurt the ear, but these sit just where they need to be, staying quite clear of being over enthusiastic. Instruments in this range have good separation from vocals and maintain their individuality without getting smeared into the vocal range. Listening to Judy Collins perform Amazing Grace in true a cappella style, there is nothing but vocals in this beautifully performed and recorded track. Her voice is brought to you almost as if you're in the same space as her, since you can hear her voice decay around her into the walls of St. Paul's Chapel. There is a trueness in the mid-range which balances male and female vocals quite well from a performance like this, and these IEMs are able to evoke emotion from this range as well. Low frequencies are brought to you in a very calm approach, especially when you're listening to acoustic music. But if you want to shift over to a little more bass-heavy music, these bring a heft to the table that I didn't think they'd be able to do. This range is slightly emphasized compared to the lower mid-range, and more so in the sub-bass region, which gives it a sense of being bigger sounding. This range can sound a little more open when using the wider board tips, but if you want a slightly tighter kick in the bass, you can always switch to the smaller board tips for a more upright, postured bass delivery. It remains well balanced and never gets obnoxious or unimpressive, unless of course you're listening to a terrifically compressed source. Listening to Coldplay's Beautiful, there's a deep rumble in the beat that I didn't expect these to handle with as much enthusiasm. I did think that it would be more of a placebo than actually be able to hear it, but these IEMs did not disappoint. This remains an enjoyable track with either ear tips, depending on how you'd prefer your bass delivery presented. But where I really enjoy the way these handle their bass is with a well-recorded acoustic track. Listening to the Scary Pockets perform Crazy, this track comes at you with a far from anemic bass response. It stays well balanced, and at no point does it bully the mid frequencies to take a back seat. Everything in this track comes together to be a foot-tapping, groovy number anyone can enjoy with these earphones. So to sum up, here I am with another set of very affordable IEMs that have just blown me away yet again. The build quality is pretty good for the price. In fact, it does always make me wonder why people are even spending money towards wireless earphones when you get this kind of quality in build and in sound from these. The build quality is top notch, and one of the things I quite like with this is they've not gone the KZ route or CCA route of having a see-through enclosure. So a lot of people didn't like that because you could see the glue on those. This is a very clean finish with the matte inner enclosure and the metal plate on the outside. Another thing I really did like is the cable they've chosen, because I have heard some IEMs in the past that have a fabric cable or a textured cable. So every time you turn your ear or you move, or if the cable rubs against a desk or any surface, you're able to hear it through the vibrations in the cable carrying on over to the IEMs. This is a very smooth and soft, flexible plastic, so it sort of absorbs that at the point. So you never hear that sort of grazing against your shirt, which is a very nice choice. As taken as I am with these IEMs, there is one thing that I found really annoying, and that is with the ear tips in particular, because they are comfortable ear tips, they are very very nice to wear. I have not had any pain with the ear tips in particular, but where I did find these an annoyance is when I was rolling. So if you're into tip rolling and you're using these ear tips in particular, it's a pain because the section that mounts onto the IEM is the same sort of soft material as the silicone tip itself. It's not firm. I've seen a few ear tips that are firmer, so they sort of slot into the holder on the IEM. It's much quicker, it's easier to do. With this, it's a bit of a struggle, and then I'm not sure if it's fitted on quite well. I've had a few times where it's fallen on the desk and rolled off the desk, and then it's a pain to find. So I would have liked if they had just used a firmer mount, and I think these would have been quite flawless then. On a comfort front, these are quite comfortable because they're super light. I've never really felt the tug of the cable around the ear loop. I've not felt the weight of the IEMs. They're really very comfortable. But the one thing I do wish they had done is maybe make a slightly longer cavity, because there are times where I just get the feeling that I want to have the ear tips a little further in. A bit ironic because I've never liked in-ear monitors in particular because they've been uncomfortable. So these, I sometimes feel like I do want them a little further in because they do sit on the outside of the ear canal fairly comfortably. So if you're not used to the in-ear style, these will be very comfortable for you. But whenever I felt that I wanted a little more snug, I've pushed them in, and that little bulge on the inner side starts to hurt my concha on the left ear. I seem to have a smaller concha on the left because I usually have this issue with some TWS earphones. So with this, I do have that sort of discomfort which leads to pain over longer listening sessions. So I've just decided to leave it where it's supposed to sit. When I do that, it sits comfortably, and it's not that I push it in because it sounds better. It sounds the same. It's just that I feel a little more comfortable if it sits a little more snug. On a sound front, it's very difficult to find anything negative with these IEMs because the guys at Truthear have tuned these really well, because at no point is it piercing. The highs are not piercing. The imaging along with the highs is not shrill or sharp where it feels like it's cutting your ears off. The bass is not over exaggerated. It's not non-existent. It does have life in that range, and the mid-range has really good separation. These are a very fun set of earphones, or should I say IEMs, to listen to. So would I recommend these IEMs to you? Well, to put it simply, the first thing I do is change the name of these IEMs. I don't think they should be called the Truthear Holas. They should be called the Truthear Goldilocks, because they seem just right on every aspect. The way they handle themselves, the way they carry themselves, I think the build quality is also terrific for the price. And coming back to the sound, I think these are very nicely tuned. I think a lot of people are going to like the way these sound, unless you're coming from a set of TWS earphones, because those, let's face it, is quite bloated. There's a lot of bloat in the bass. There's not as much detail. So if you're looking for clarity, if you're getting into the whole IEM game and you just have a certain amount of money to spend, these are a very safe set to go for. These are definitely going to introduce you to the world of audiophilia. It's going to show you better detail. You're going to hear way more nuances in your music than if you're using a set of wireless earphones. So if you would like to buy these, let's talk about their pricing. At the time of recording this video, they have an MRP of about 2,199. Whereas they're being sold for 1,999 if you're choosing to go for the microphone variant, and if you're choosing to go for the non-microphone variant, they're going for 1,899 here in India. And you can buy these from Headphone Zone. I will leave the link down below if you'd like to buy it from that link. And honestly, at this price, it's yet another set of earphones that are in the sub 2,000 category. It's super affordable. It's super accessible. It's very within reach, no doubt. This is not including if you want an external DAC, a dongle DAC or so on, because those can range in price. But this by itself, if you have a headphone jack, or if you have a music player, or if you just want to plug it into your computer, yeah, you might have certain bottlenecks that exist before these IEMs. So I think these IEMs are a very good buy and a terrific introduction into the audiophile world if you are thinking about getting into it. So I do hope you found this video helpful and informative. And of course, if you would like to support the channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to. I hope I helped you make some sort of purchase decision. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.